morning. Oh my God, this is so fun. I love it. Thank you for reaching out.
I'm glad you held it up. So do I.
Anna White, like.
Yeah, exactly.
When I started my consulting firm back in 2015, I really wanted to focus on women in the workplace and what were some of the barriers that prevented us from advancing into positions of power and influence. And in doing that, I started to really see these incredible examples across a variety of industries of women within those spaces that were very male dominated who were changing them.
But I just found it so interesting that you didn't limit yourself to which women you'd be interviewing. You know, you ran the gamut between the sports industry with NFL and even the sex industry with pornography.
When you're writing a book, you're sort of, you know, under the mushroom, right? And nobody knows what you're doing and you're kind of in hiding for a while.
Right.
I happen to be watching, HBO has Real Sports, is the Bryant Gumbel series, and they go on the personal side of people involved in sports. And one of the segments featured Laura, and I saw that her story is that she, for years, was a very credible, very knowledgeable, very reputable NFL sportscaster, and as she started reaching the age of 40, her on-camera assignments were being given to women that were not only younger than her, but were less prepared and less knowledgeable. So Laura had a moment where she could say, okay, I'm going to leave this career, I'm going to retire, or I'm going to work within this to make this experience better for other women. From there, I reached out to all the other women who are featured in the book, some of who I knew personally before, but many of whom I didn't. I was astounded at not only the speed of the response that they got back to me, but their generosity in allowing me to share their stories. And for a lot of them, I was the first person to really tell their story in a book and in this narrative way.
So many times if you're being dethroned, it's very easy to feel defensive and combative, and especially if, and I hate to say it, but if it's another woman, because we're kind of taught to be very competitive with each other, whereas men are taught to collaborate and work together and have each other's back.
I think we're taught that there's scarcity for opportunities for leadership and power. Right now, we're in a moment where I think we're seeing that that's been false, that that's been told to us to keep us from really expanding our own ambitions to places where we're not welcome. So Laura is a great example of that, where she really created her own path. She, in the story, I tell about her friendship with another very famous sportscaster and how they really nurtured and mentored each other because they were outliers for very different but distinct reasons. That collaborative nature, I think, is truly what's innate in women when we peel off the layers of socialization that tell us that there's scarcity for us. And they're pretty easy to identify. So once I did that, then I started looking at who's changing the game here, who's really re-architecting these spaces. So I cover the Catholic Church. I mean, find me one more male-dominated space than that, right? The venture capital space, we touched on it earlier, pornography is, you know, you can say, yeah, women are part of it, but they're just expendable tools. They're not creating it and they're not benefiting from it, and they're certainly not profiting from it. This is the challenge that I put forward every time, is really look at what's your model for leadership. Who are the people that are getting particularly promoted from within into leadership? Because that's the culture you're promoting. Those are the behaviors that people are going to model. I have a mentor, sponsor, advocate, ally framework that I use in my consulting work. One of the requirements for the leadership path here at your organization, that if someone has not organically exhibited sponsorship and advocacy behaviors, they're not on a path for leadership. They might be a great individual producer. They might have great potential in other ways, but if they're not bringing through other people in the organization, and particularly people who do not look or act like they are, they shouldn't be considered in the same way. Doesn't mean you can't work with them and nurture that with them, but it really needs to be something that gets rewarded, and then it will get modeled. I admit that I was in my late 20s when it finally dawned on me that all the rules were set by and for men. I think that awareness is one that a lot of women, particularly privileged white women, don't come to until it's shown to them.
Almost identical to my story as well. I was in, let's say, my early 20s when something happened in my life that made me start shifting everything that I had known to be true up until that point. And for the last 6 years or 7 years, I've been slowly and gradually working through those and undoing all of these truths that I had believed growing up. And it is, to me, a never-ending process, right? It's like any type of growth that you're trying to do. It's going to be continuous if it's important to you. Our own tendencies are second nature at this point when you're an adult. And so much of it you have to become very mindful about and stay in that present moment and recognize, how are my words and my thoughts impacting the environment around me? And if you don't ask those tough questions and become aware of it, you'll never be able to overcome them and rewrite them.
Yeah, it's exhausting to be so intentional all the time, isn't it?
The only privilege I don't have is that I'm not male. To be set back so far and have only one thing working against me, and as you mentioned, they recognize that reality so much sooner in their lives. If you don't think that you are an underdog, you're not going to let anyone stand in your way. But if you become aware, then all of a sudden you think, oh, maybe they're doing that because of this, and maybe this is affecting that. And it changes your behavior.
My encouragement that everyone find intentionally someone that they can sponsor in some aspect of their lives to share some of that experience, but also you'll have opportunities to bring that voice forward and give that person an opportunity to shine independently with you, around you, or because of you. And that's powerful. And that's where you and I can step into our privilege and use it to benefit a lot of other people around us.
Ronan Dunn to write the foreword, which is awesome. And for me, tying that together, it shows that male allies are very important to our female cause.
I very deliberately started with Ronan and his message, and he was the right choice for so many reasons. And I'm just so grateful that he allowed me to highlight him in this way. But it's so important because there are still some men in industry that will only listen to other men. So Ronan launches the book by writing the foreword, and I close with some very moving, inspirational words from President Obama. I happened to be invited to the White House a bunch of years ago and was part of this massive, wonderful women's event. And when he spoke, it just resonated deeply with me. So I think having men as sort of the bookends on this body of work that I constructed allows us women to see that there are strong, powerful men who are vocal advocates and allies for us. But it also allows the men who I want to read my book to see that it's not that hard. Use your strength to benefit other people. And that's, I think, what Ronan has done so well. You guys at Verizon pivoted really quickly to how can we still service our customer base that are used to coming in to our locations and handing over their phones to our technicians and getting on the spot effective service. You did that. And I think your loyalty, we will see, but I believe that the loyalty of your customers is going to be reflected strongly in that.
We just got published Forbes list of 100 companies, and we hit #1 for our expediency with responding during COVID, which I just think is incredible because it's such a testament to the people within the organization. We rose to the occasion, we ran to the crisis, we did all the things in our credo, and it's in our hearts. And I think that Forbes noticed that and recognized us for it, and it couldn't have been just more rewarding in that moment, because I think it's so important to acknowledge people's progress. As we've been saying throughout this, if you like the behavior, you need to reward it so it keeps happening and it continues to be modeled by the people and the companies around where the behavior is occurring.